Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we turn the most complex, detail-oriented documents into easily digestible knowledge you can deploy immediately.
Glad to be diving in again.
Today, we are taking a scalpel, really, to one of the most foundational areas of criminal law, offenses against property.
Yep, burglary and criminal trespass.
Exactly. We're decoding exactly when someone crosses the line from, just being present on your property to committing these pretty serious criminal offenses.
And it's often not what people think.
Right. If you've ever thought these crimes were just about breaking in, well, prepare to be surprised. The law is written with this incredible, almost surgical precision.
Defining everything, down to the color of paint on a fence post.
It's wild. Our mission, as always, is to take the dense language of the source material today, that's Chapter 30 of the Penal Code, and make sure that you, the learner, get a fast, thorough, and totally clear understanding of these critical legal distinctions.
Making the complex simple. That's the goal.
Now, before we grab our legal magnifying glass and really jump into the statutes, if you appreciate this kind of in-depth, no-fluff breakdown, could you do us a quick favor right now?
Yeah, it really helps us out.
Supporting the deep dive is as easy as hitting that subscribe button. Your subscription is absolutely crucial. It genuinely helps our channel grow, allowing us to keep dedicating the time needed for these, well, highly technical dives.
Takes a lot of prep time to get these right.
It really does. Also, remember to head over to our website. We've got supplemental materials, links to all the specific code sections we're discussing today, so you can, continue your own research if you want.
Okay, so the material today.
Yeah.
It's hyper-focused on definitions and conditions. These are the things that determine criminal liability.
Right.
This whole chapter is built around protecting property rights, and it breaks it down logically. Defining the place, defining the intent, and defining the act itself.
So what's the plan? Where do we start?
We'll cover the foundational building blocks, first the definitions, then the core elements of burglary, including some specialized targets like vehicles and, believe it or not, coin-op machines.
Okay.
And then we'll shift to the really granular details of criminal trespass, where specific notice is absolutely everything, right down to the exact wording on a sign.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Let's unpack this, starting with the groundwork. In everyday life, we all know what a house or a garage is. Pretty obvious.
Seems obvious, yeah.
But the law demands definitions that are, well, way more precise than just common sense. When we talk about property offenses, how does the code officially categorize the places where these crimes happen?
Right. So we absolutely must master three foundational terms first: habitation, building, and vehicle.
Okay.
This differentiation is like the first legal domino to fall.
Yeah.
Because the severity of the crime, whether it's a felony or misdemeanor and what level, it's intrinsically linked to which type of structure was targeted.
Makes sense. Let's start at the top then, the category that carries the stiffest penalties: habitation. What's the legal threshold? What makes something a habitation?
Okay, so a habitation isn't just any structure. It's a structure or vehicle that's adapted for the overnight accommodation of persons.
Adapted for, okay. So it's not just that someone could crash there for a night.
Exactly. It has to be designed or configured for that purpose. Think house, apartment, RV, set up for living. It's the law's way of identifying a private residence, basically, a place where people are most vulnerable.
Got it. And you mentioned some important inclusions.
Yeah, this is really critical. The definition specifically includes each separately secured or occupied portion. So think every individual apartment in a complex, each one is its own habitation.
Okay.
But here's the key legal expansion. The definition extends to each structure appurtenant to or connected with the main structure.
Whoa, hold on. Let's stop there and really unpack that. Appurtenant to or connected with.
Good.
What does that actually mean for, say, someone listening who has an attached garage? Or maybe a shed connected by a roof?
It means that attached garage, even if it's just full of junk and tools, is legally treated the same as the main house for burglary purposes.
Seriously?
Seriously. Same for an enclosed shed connected by a covered walkway, or even, say, a patio that's enclosed by 3 walls and has a roof. Legally, it's part of the habitation.
That is a massive legal distinction. So if someone breaks into my attached empty shed just intending to steal a lawnmower,
The prosecutor isn't charging burglary of a building. They're charging burglary of a habitation.
which bumps it up significantly in penalty.
Instantly. right up to a second-degree felony, typically. The law basically says the vulnerability and the privacy associated with your home extends to all these connected spaces, even if you don't actually sleep in the garage or the shed.
Wow. Okay, that's a brilliant distinction. And yeah, it raises the stakes immediately. So then what about a building? Is that just the catch-all category for everything else?
Pretty much, yeah. A building is the broader category. It's defined as any enclosed structure intended for use or occupation as a habitation or for some other purpose, like trade, manufacturing, ornament, or just general use.
No, wait. My house is a habitation. Is it also a building then?
Technically, yes. Your home fits both definitions, but a big commercial warehouse or a factory or like a downtown office tower structures purely for business or trade, those are generally classified only as buildings.
So the distinction is really about the primary function, and it's key for grading the offense. Why does the law care so much about this specific difference?
Well, the legislative intent seems pretty clear. Reserve the most severe punishment for invading someone's personal sanctuary, their home.
Right, where they sleep.
Exactly. Burglary of a building, which is usually a state jail felony, is serious, no doubt. But burglary of a habitation, jump up to a second-degree felony, is considered far graver. There's the increased psychological trauma, and frankly, a higher likelihood of direct, possibly violent confrontation when you invade a place adapted for overnight stays.
Makes sense. Okay, moving on to the third category, vehicle. How's this defined in the code? Especially since, as you mentioned, some vehicles like RVs can actually be habitations.
Yeah, the general definition of a vehicle is pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Any device used for propulsion, movement, or drawing of people or property in commerce or transportation. Cars, trucks, boats, trains.
Standard stuff.
Standard stuff. But the important legal note here is a specific exclusion within this chapter of the code. Any device that meets the criteria to be classified as a habitation is excluded from the general vehicle definition for the purposes of this chapter.
Okay. So that prevents, say, someone's RV they live in or an occupied mobile home from being treated just like a car if it's broken into.
Precisely. If it's adapted for sleeping, someone's using it that way, its sanctity is protected under the habitation definition. That overrides the basic vehicle classification in this context.
Okay, so we've defined the locations. Now let's turn to the act itself. Burglary. And as you hinted, this is far more nuanced than just, kicking in a door. This statute lays out three specific pathways, three distinct ways a person can commit this offense. What are they? And how do they differ based on, when the bad intent happens?
Right. And crucially, all three pathways require the act be done without the owner's effective consent. That's baseline.
Got it. No consent.
They're structured to capture malicious behavior, whether the intent was there before the entry, developed during the entry, or maybe even formed while hiding inside.
Okay, so what's the first one? The classic scenario.
The first is what most people think of. Entry with prior intent. The person enters a habitation or a building that's not open to the public with the already formed intent to commit a felony, theft, or an assault.
So the criminal plan exists before any part of their body crosses the threshold?
Exactly. Intent precedes entry.
Okay. But what if someone enters a place lawfully? Maybe they walk into a store during business hours, totally normal. But then they decide to do something wrong. That leads us to the second type, right?
Exactly right. The second offense is remaining concealed with intent. In this scenario, the entry itself might have been totally fine, maybe even invited. They could be an authorized guest, a customer, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
However, they then remain concealed in the building or habitation. They hide. And while they're concealed, they form the intent to commit a felony, theft, or assault.
Can you give us a more detailed example here? This idea of concealment kind of changing the legal nature of an initially lawful entry seems really important.
Absolutely. Imagine a large department store, right?
Mm-hmm.
A person walks in normally maybe 10 minutes before closing time. Looks like any other shopper.
Okay.
Then, instead of leaving, they sneak into the back warehouse area and hide inside a big stack of empty boxes. They stay there, hidden from view, until all the employees leave, the lights go out, alarms are set. Then, they emerge from the boxes with the plan, the intent, to steal a bunch of expensive electronics. The moment they successfully remain concealed and that criminal intent was formed, the offense of burglary is complete.
Even though they walked in the front door totally legally earlier.
Yep. Because the law recognizes that once you deliberately conceal yourself like that, you've violated the trust and the security of that space. You're no longer just a customer.
Wow. Okay. And the third type of burglary. It sounds like it removes the need to prove when the intent was formed.
Yeah, it's basically its function, yeah. The third offense is entry and commission. This happens when a person enters a building or habitation and then actually commits or attempts to commit a felony, theft, or an assault.
Ah.
In this scenario, the commission of the crime itself, the theft, the assault, whatever it is, serves as the necessary evidence of the prohibited activity. It kind of sidesteps the often difficult job for the prosecutor of proving what was inside the defendant's head before they crossed the threshold.
So if they broke in and stole something, the act of stealing basically proves the illegal purpose of the entry.
Exactly. The act speaks for itself in that case.
Okay, here we go. This feels like the absolute crux of this whole discussion. The detail that really separates burglary as a serious felony from something lesser like misdemeanor trespass. For those first and third types of burglary, the ones involving entry, how minimal does the physical intrusion actually need to be?
This is the legal aha moment, like you said earlier. For burglary, the definition of enter is, well, shockingly minimal. And that reflects the high stakes involved when criminal intent is present.
Okay, define it for us.
Entry is defined as the intrusion of any part of the body.
Any part.
Any part.
Well,
or any physical object connected with the body.
okay, wait, let's break that down. So if a would-be burglar is just standing outside my window, they haven't entered.
Correct, still outside.
But if they break the glass and then stick just one fingertip through that broken pane.
Entry achieved.
Hmm.
For burglar purposes.
Or what if they don't put their hand in, but they use like a long hook on a stick, something connected to their hand, to try and snag my keys off a table just inside the window?
That counts too. The moment that fingertip, or that connected tool like the hook, crosses the inner plane of the structure, the window frame, the door jamb entry for the purpose of burglary is legally achieved.
Wow.
We sometimes call it the fingerprint rule. The intrusion can be absolutely minimal, tiny even, but because it's coupled with that intent to commit a serious crime, the law immediately recognizes it as a high level of criminal conduct. You don't need your whole body inside. You just need that minimal, malicious intrusion.
That's fascinating and, frankly, a bit scary. Okay, let's talk punishment scaling. You mentioned the grading system here is rigorous.
It is, and it's entirely premise-dependent, linking back to those definitions we started with.
Right, habitation versus building.
Exactly. So the general rule for burglary of a commercial or public use building, remember, not a habitation, is a state jail felony.
Which carries what kind of time?
Maximum sentence is 2 years in a state jail facility, plus fines, potentially.
Okay. But if that same crime, same intent, is committed in a habitation,
Then the offense immediately escalates. It becomes a felony of the second degree,
and the potential sentence there.
much higher, 2 to 20 years in prison. The difference is stark, reflecting that protected status of the home.
And the law reserves the absolute highest enhancement of first-degree felony for the worst kind of home invasions, right?
That's right. That's reserved for what the code effectively treats as the most egregious situations. We call the enhanced felony grading. The offense becomes a felony of the first degree if 2 specific conditions are met.
Okay, what are they?
First, the premises must be a habitation. Second, the person's intent was to commit a felony other than felony theft.
So something more serious than just stealing stuff.
Exactly. Or if they actually committed or attempted to commit a felony other than felony theft once inside. This focuses the highest penalty range, 5 years, all the way up to 99 years, or life in prison on those who invade a home intending to commit a violent crime. Think sexual assault, aggravated assault, arson, murder.
Things far worse than just taking property.
Precisely. The intent is seen as fundamentally more dangerous in that context.
And you also mentioned a specialized enhancement for burglarizing commercial buildings that house specific high-value or dangerous items.
Yes, there's a specific bump up for commercial controlled substance targeting. This enhances the charge to a felony in the third degree if the place burglarized is a commercial building like a pharmacy, a hospital, a clinic, or maybe a specialized pharmaceutical warehouse, and the specific intent was to commit theft of a controlled substance.
Why the special rule for drugs?
It reflects a legal recognition that stealing controlled substances presents a unique public danger. Plus, there's often a high potential for profit in the illicit drug market, which might incentivize these specific types of burglaries. So the law adds an extra layer of deterrence.
Okay, that covers the main burglary statute. Now let's transition smoothly, as you said, to crimes targeting more specific, maybe less traditional structures. The code is incredibly meticulous, even covering things like vending machines.
Yep, Section 30.03 deals specifically with the burglary of coin-operated machines, or coin collection machines, things like that.
Okay.
This section is really aimed at protecting those low-level, automated commercial services. The offense is defined as breaking or entering any coin-operated machine or receptacle, apparatus, equipment used for lawful sales, services, amusement, telecommunications, basically anything you put coins into to get something back.
Like a gumball machine or an
Yeah.
arcade game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or a laundromat washing machine, a payphone receptacle, a vending machine. If you break into it with the intent to steal the property inside, like the snacks or coins or the services it provides, that's the offense.
Why does the law need a specific crime for this? Couldn't they just charge, I don't know, theft or criminal mischief for busting open a machine?
That's a fair question. Legislative intent suggests a couple of reasons. First, the damage done breaking into the machine often far outweighs the value of whatever is stolen, maybe just a few dollars in quarters. So the crime involves an intrusion into a secured compartment, which kind of fits the structure of burglary, even if the stakes are lower.
Okay.
Second, by making it a clear, defined offense specifically, a Class A misdemeanor, it gives police and prosecutors a straightforward, effective charge for these really common crimes. It avoids burdening the felony courts with every single vending machine break-in, while still treating it more seriously than simple petty theft due to the breaking and entering aspect.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, moving to something incredibly common, unfortunately, burglary of vehicles. Section 30.04.
Yes, very common. Burglary of a vehicle is committed when a person, without the owner's effective consent, breaks into or enters a vehicle or any part of a vehicle.
Any part, like just popping the trunk.
Yep, breaking into the trunk counts, or the main cabin, obviously. And the required intent is to commit any felony or theft.
Okay, and crucially, what's the definition of enter here? Is it the same super low standard as regular burglary?
It is exactly the same minimal standard: intrusion of any part of the body or a connected physical object.
So let's say someone uses one of those long coat hanger things, or maybe a Slim Jim tool, to try and unlock my car door from the outside. They haven't put their hand or head inside yet.
Doesn't matter. The moment that tool connected to their body crosses the plane of the window or door seal with the intent to commit theft, like stealing the car stereo or anything inside, that's legally considered a completed vehicle burglary.
Wow. Even if they don't succeed in getting the door open.
Even if they don't succeed, the entry with intent is the crime.
Okay. And you mentioned a specific note about rail transport.
Yeah, the statute specifically includes a provision stating that any container or trailer being carried on a rail car is considered legally part of the rail car itself for the purposes of this section.
Well, I add that.
It's to protect high-value freight often shipped in those containers. It closes a potential loophole where someone might argue they only broke into the container, not the rail car itself. The law says, nope, it's all one protected unit in transit.
Got it. Let's talk about the punishment scheme for vehicle burglary, because it seems like it escalates really quickly for repeat offenders. It almost suggests, like, a deep frustration in the legal system with this specific type of pervasive crime.
You're reading that right. The penalties definitely reflect a get-tough approach on recidivism here. While the default punishment for a first offense is a Class A misdemeanor.
Which is up to a year in county jail, right?
Correct. And/or a fine. But if a person has just one prior conviction for vehicle burglary, they still face a Class A misdemeanor, but with a mandatory minimum jail time of 6 months.
Mandatory minimum. So the judge has to give them at least 6 months jail. No probation option for that part.
That's the intent of the statute, yes. It removes the option for just probation on a second offense. They have to serve time.
Okay. And if they keep doing it?
If the defendant has been convicted 2 or more times previously for vehicle burglary, or if the target of the current burglary was a rail car, the offense gets enhanced immediately to a state jail felony.
Jumping from misdemeanor to felony.
Exactly. It's a clear legislative statement that repeat offenders specializing in car break-ins or those targeting valuable rail freight are considered a more serious threat warranting felony-level consequences.
And that specific drug enhancement we saw earlier applies here too.
It does in a very specific context.
Yeah.
The offense gets elevated even further up to a felony of the 3rd degree if the vehicle being burglarized is owned or operated by a wholesale distributor of prescription drugs, and the intent was specifically to steal a controlled substance.
So targeting like a pharmacy delivery van full of specific drugs.
Precisely. This is a critical provision aimed squarely at protecting the integrity of the medical supply chain. The concern here is less about the vehicle itself and more about the serious public health risk if controlled pharmaceuticals are easily intercepted during transport.
Makes sense. And we did note one specific defense related to those railcar incidents.
Yes, just a quick note on that. The code provides a defense if the person who entered the rail car was an employee, or maybe a representative of employees, who was exercising rights protected under the Federal Railway Labor Act.
So like a union activity or something.
Could be. It's a fairly standard legal safeguard you see in various property statutes to prevent legitimate labor disputes, safety inspections, or unionizing activities from being accidentally criminalized under burglary laws. Okay, deep breath. We're now shifting focus entirely. We're moving from burglary to criminal trespass, section 30.05.
Right, and this is fundamentally different, you said.
Fundamentally different. Because unlike burglary, criminal trespass does not require the person to have the intent to commit some other serious crime, like a felony or theft.
Okay, so no bad intent needed beyond just being there.
Essentially, yes. It's purely about being somewhere you're not supposed to be unauthorized presence after you've been adequately warned or told to leave.
So what is the core offense of criminal trespass? How is it defined?
Okay, a person commits criminal trespass if they enter or remain on or in the property of another. And this includes a wide range of places. Agricultural land, residential land, buildings, aircraft, vehicles.
Pretty broad.
Very broad. So they enter or remain there without effective consent, A and D. This is the crucial part. They meet one of two specific notice conditions.
Notice conditions. Okay, what are they?
Condition 1. The person had noticed that the entry was forbidden before they even went onto the property.
So they knew beforehand they shouldn't go there, like seeing a no trespassing sign.
Exactly. Or condition 2.
Yeah.
The person maybe entered okay or didn't realize, but then they received notice to depart after they entered, and they failed to promptly leave.
Like the owner coming out and saying, "Get off my lawn."
Precisely. The entire concept hinges on the clarity and effectiveness of that warning or notice.
Okay, this brings us back to what you called the most critical legal distinction in this entire deep dive. It's about entry again. We learned for the serious felony of burglary, just a fingertip, just a tool connected to the body, is enough intrusion.
Right. Minimal intrusion, high intent.
What is the standard for entry when we're talking about the lower offense of criminal trespass, where the intent isn't necessarily criminal beyond just being there?
This is where the law draws that really clear line, based largely on that intent factor. For criminal trespass, entry means the intrusion of the entire body.
The entire body.
The entire body. Not just a finger, not just a foot halfway over the line. Your whole self has to be on the property.
Okay, let's walk through an example. If I'm standing fully on my neighbor's front porch, which is definitely their private property, and they come out and tell me to leave and I refuse, my entire body is present on their land.
Correct. You've entered with your entire body, you received notice to depart, and you failed to do so. That's criminal trespass.
Okay. Now, let's rewind to the burglar scenario on that same porch. If that person, instead of just standing there arguing, sticks one hand through an open pet door on the front door with the intent to unlock it and steal things inside.
That minimal intrusion, just the hand, because it's coupled with that criminal intent to commit theft or a felony, makes it a second-degree felony burglary of a habitation.
But if they stick their hand in that same pet door, maybe without that criminal intent, say they're just curious about the door, or maybe trying to retrieve their kid's ball that rolled in and the owner comes out, tells them, "Get your hand out of there and get off my porch," and they refuse to leave the porch.
Then the charge, assuming they eventually leave but refused initially, would likely only be misdemeanor criminal trespass. Because the initial intrusion wasn't burglary, no felonious intent, and the trespass is based on failing to depart after notice, where the entire body was present on the porch.
Wow. This really raises the question, though. Why such a drastically different standard for entry? Why demand the entire body for trespass when the stakes seem lower? No inherent criminal intent.
It seems counterintuitive at first, maybe, but the differing standard really grapples with the inherent ambiguity of, say, non-criminal curiosity or just accidental intrusion.
Ah, like leaning over a fence.
Exactly. The law needs to protect property owners' rights without accidentally criminalizing someone who maybe just leans into an open garage to ask a question or accidentally steps 1 foot over an invisible property line while walking their dog.
Right.
By requiring the intrusion of the entire body for basic criminal trespass, the law reserves that lesser charge for situations where there's an unambiguous full-scale presence on the property without permission. It avoids criminalizing trivial or accidental boundary crossings. But the moment serious criminal intent enters the picture with burglary, the law drops that threshold dramatically down to any part because the potential harm is so much greater.
Okay, that distinction is crystal clear now. Since notice is absolutely required for trespass, you have to know you weren't supposed to be there. or be told to leave the law must be extremely clear on what counts as legally valid notice. And you mentioned there are 5 highly specific ways a property owner can legally provide this warning. Some sound pretty unique.
They are quite specific, yes. The first one is the most straightforward. Oral or written communication. Basically, the owner, or someone who clearly has the authority to act for the owner, like a manager or a security guard, tells you directly, either by speaking to you or giving you a written note, that entry is forbidden or that you need to leave.
Simple enough. What's number 2?
Number 2 relies on the property itself sending the message. Fencing or enclosure. If the property is surrounded by a fence or some other kind of enclosure that is obviously designed either to keep intruders out or to keep livestock in, that fence itself serves as legal notice.
So just seeing a proper fence communicates stay out?
Generally, yes, if it's clearly meant to define a boundary and exclude entry.
Okay. And third is the classic sign.
Right, the standard signs. They need to be posted in a way that's reasonably likely to come to the attention of potential intruders. They can't be hidden. And they need to clearly indicate, in language people can understand, that entry is forbidden. Placement and visibility are key here.
Makes sense.
Okay, now we get to the legendary one. The one that, I have to admit, sounds like it belongs in a different century, or maybe a cartoon. The purple paint rule.
Cuckles. Yeah, it does sound a bit archaic, but it's actually a really brilliant, low-cost solution, especially for owners of large tracts of rural land, particularly forested land, where putting up and maintaining fences or signs constantly is just impractical.
Okay, so how does purple paint work as legal notice?
The law specifically says that notice can be given by placing identifying purple paint marks on trees or posts along the property line. But the specifications are incredibly rigid to make sure it's clear and unambiguous.
How rigid are we talking?
Very. The marks have to be vertical lines, not horizontal, not squiggles. Vertical.
Okay.
They must be not less than 8 inches long and not less than 1 inch wide.
8 inches by 1 inch. Got it. What about placement?
Placement matters a lot for visibility. The bottom of the purple mark must be placed not less than 3 feet from the ground, but not more than 5 feet from the ground.
So it can't be a tiny purple dot hidden down in the weeds, and it can't be like a giant purple smear way up high on a telephone pole nobody would notice.
Precisely. It has to be in that visible band, roughly eye level for most people walking.
Okay. And how close together do these purple marks need to be?
That depends on the type of land. On forest land, think of areas where trees might be valuable timber, so boundaries are really important. The marks have to be readily visible to someone approaching the line and placed no more than 100 feet apart.
100 feet for forests.
If it's other land, maybe open pasture or just undeveloped land, they can be spaced further apart, up to 1,000 feet apart.
Wow, quite a difference. But still, the incredible detail here ensures that property owners have this consistent, legally enforceable way to mark their boundaries without needing constant fence repair or sign replacement.
Exactly. It's surprisingly practical, despite sounding odd.
That attention to detail really is astonishing. Okay, what's the 5th and final way the law recognizes legal notice, something tied to farming?
The 5th method is the visible crops rule. Notice is considered legally given by the visible presence on the property of a crop that's being grown for human consumption.
Like corn or tomatoes.
Exactly. If that crop is currently under cultivation, you can see the rows the plant's growing, or if it's actively being harvested, or even if it's just standing there ripe and would be marketable if harvested, the visible presence of that valuable, working agricultural cash crop serves as its own legal warning sign. Don't walk through the farmer's field.
Interesting. Okay, let's quickly review the penalties for trespass. They generally start much lower than burglary, as we'd expect, but they can still escalate based on where the trespass happens, right?
Absolutely. The default trespass offense, just basic trespassing on standard property after notice, is a Class B misdemeanor.
Which carries up to 180 days in jail and/or a fine.
Correct. It actually drops down to a Class C misdemeanor, which is typically a fine only, like a traffic ticket, if the trespass happens on agricultural land, but just within 100 feet of the boundary line, or on residential land that's also within 100 feet of a protected freshwater area. Kind of minor incursions.
Okay. But there are enhancements that push it up higher.
Oh, yes. The enhancement pushes the crime up to a Class A misdemeanor that's back up to a year in jail if the trespass is committed in certain places deemed to need extra protection due to vulnerability or security concerns.
Like what?
These include inside a habitation, so getting inside the house itself without permission, even without intent to steal, inside a shelter center, like for homeless individuals or domestic violence victims, on a Superfund site, hazardous waste areas, or, importantly, on the property of a critical infrastructure facility.
Okay, critical infrastructure. We need to define that.
We do. It also jumps to Class A if the person committing the trespass is carrying a deadly weapon at the time, or if they're a repeat offender, specifically trespassing on the property of an institution of higher education, like a college campus they've been banned from.
Let's focus on that critical infrastructure facility enhancement. What specific requirement must the facility meet for trespassing there to trigger that higher Class A misdemeanor penalty?
For the enhancement to apply, the facility must be completely enclosed by a fence or other physical barrier that is obviously designed to exclude intruders. It needs that clear physical boundary.
Now, what kind of places count as critical infrastructure?
The statute lists examples like electrical power generating facilities, petroleum refineries, chemical plants, water intake structures or water treatment facilities, natural gas compressor stations, and interestingly, railroad switching yards are specifically included.
So places where an intrusion could cause significant disruption or danger.
Exactly. The law places a high value on protecting the continuous, safe operation of these essential utilities and transport hubs. It recognizes that trespassing there poses a potential threat to public safety, the economy, security, but that fence or barrier is key. If the refinery isn't properly fenced to keep people out, the trespass might not qualify for that specific enhancement.
Okay. Finally, for general trespass, we saw there are some defenses, mostly protecting people who might have to enter property as part of their job or an emergency.
Yes, several important defenses.
Yeah.
They include firefighters and emergency medical services EMS personnel who enter during the course of their official duty under exigent circumstances, emergencies.
Right, they can't stop to ask permission if a house is on fire.
Exactly. Also, utility employees, electric, natural gas, telecommunications workers performing duties related to their job, like reading a meter or repairing a line. And again, we see that defense related to the Railway Labor Act for employees in a switching yard.
And one more defense related to protests.
Crucially, yes. There's a specific defense against the enhancement for trespassing at a critical infrastructure facility if the entry was part of a peaceful or lawful assembly, including activities related to labor union rights or organizing. This tries to balance the need to protect those vital facilities against the constitutional rights to free speech and assembly, particularly for labor activities.
All right, we've saved probably the most layered, maybe the most complex area for last. Sections 30.05, 30.06, and 30.07. These seem to create a whole separate legal regime, specifically defining how a property owner can legally prohibit licensed handgun carriers from entering their property, and what very specific legal standards must be met to enforce those prohibitions.
That's exactly right. This is where we see the legislature trying to balance Second Amendment rights for licensed carriers with the traditional rights of private property owners to control who enters their land and under what conditions. And yeah, it gets codified down to the precise font size on a sign.
So it starts under the General Trespass Statute, 30.05. Property owners can forbid any firearms there.
Yes, the General Trespass section, 30.05, allows a property owner to provide notice that carrying any firearm onto the property is prohibited. They can do this using a sign with specific required language.
What are the requirements for that general firearm prohibition sign under 30.05?
It typically needs to state that entry with a firearm is forbidden pursuant to Section 30.05, Penal Code. It generally requires the notice be in both English and Spanish, use contrasting colors for visibility, and have block letters at least 1 inch high.
Okay, and what's the penalty if someone ignores that general sign and enters with a firearm?
Usually the penalty for violating only that general 30.05 firearm prohibition sign is very minor.
Yeah.
It's a Class C misdemeanor, which means a fine only, not to exceed $200.
Okay, fine, only. But the law then recognizes that if the person carrying the firearm is actually a licensed handgun carrier under Chapter 411 Government Code, they might have a defense against that minor charge, right? Which then forces the property owner to use even more specific signs if they really want to keep licensed carriers out.
That's the crucial transition point. If the property owner only posts that general 30.05 sign, no firearms, a person who is licensed to carry a handgun, either concealed or openly where permitted, generally has a defense to prosecution under that section.
So that general sign isn't enough to legally stop a license holder?
Not usually, no.
Yeah.
To legally prohibit licensed handgun carriers, the property owner must utilize the much stricter, highly specific signage required under Section 30.06 for concealed carry and/or Section 30.07 for open carry.
Okay, let's conduct a compare and contrast here because the requirements for the 30.06 sign, no concealed carry, and the 30.07 sign, no open carry, seem almost identical visually, but they differ critically in their legal function and maybe even placement. Let's start with trespass by license holder with a concealed handgun. Section 30.06. What defines that?
Okay, the offense under 30.06 is pretty straightforward. A person who holds a license to carry a handgun commits an offense if they carry a concealed handgun onto the property of another without effective consent, and they receive notice that entry onto the property by a license holder with a concealed handgun was forbidden.
And how is that notice given? Primarily through the sign.
Primarily through a very specific sign, yes, or through direct oral or written communication. But the sign is key. It must contain language that appears in contrasting colors with block letters at least 1 inch high, stating something very close to. Pursuant to Section 30.06, Penal Code, trespass by a license holder with a concealed handgun, a person licensed under Subchapter H, Chapter 411, Government Code, Handgun Licensing Law, may not enter this property with a concealed handgun.
And it needs to be in English and Spanish.
Yes. The statute requires the sign contain this language in both English and Spanish.
Okay. What's the intent behind demanding that super specific wording, citing the exact statute?
The intent is to ensure the notice is absolutely unambiguous to the license holder. It clearly communicates that the property owner is invoking the specific statute that overrides their general privilege to carry concealed, granted by their license. It leaves no room for doubt about the owner's intent to prohibit licensed concealed carry.
And the penalty for violating a proper 30.06 sign.
Similar to the general firearms sign, it starts low. It's typically a Class C misdemeanor, fine up to $200. However, it can escalate to a Class A misdemeanor if the license holder was personally given oral notice by the owner or authorized person that entry was forbidden, and they subsequently failed to depart.
Okay. Now let's compare that directly to trespass by license holder with an openly carried handgun, Section 30.07. What's the key difference here, besides obviously referring to open carry instead of concealed?
Well, the sign requirements are aesthetically almost identical.
Mm-hmm.
The 30.07 sign needs contrasting colors, 1-inch block letters, English and Spanish, and language specifically citing Section 30.07 Penal Code regarding openly carried handguns. It basically mirrors the 30.06 sign, but swaps concealed handgun for openly carried handgun.
Okay, seems parallel. But you mentioned a difference in placement.
Yes, and this is a critical distinction. The 30.07 sign, the one prohibiting open carry by license holders, must be displayed in a conspicuous manner, clearly visible to the public, at each entrance to the property.
At each entrance. That sounds like a much higher burden on the property owner compared to the 30.06 sign, which I think just requires conspicuous display generally.
It is a higher burden. The 30.06 sign needs to be conspicuous, but the 30.07 sign has that added requirement of being posted at every single public entrance.
Why the stricter placement rule specifically for the open carry prohibition?
The rationale likely reflects the inherently higher visibility of open carry itself. Someone openly carrying a handgun is, well, openly displaying it. The law seems to want to ensure that such a person has the absolute maximum opportunity to see their prohibitory sign before they enter, thus minimizing potential confusion or conflict. It effectively places a higher burden of proof on the property owner to demonstrate they provided effective notice against open carry.
Okay, that makes sense. And there was another critical point about 30.07 regarding holsters.
Yes, very important connection. The statute explicitly clarifies that for a violation under 30.07, trespass while openly carrying, it is not a defense to prosecution that the handgun was being carried in a shoulder or belt holster.
So even if you're carrying openly in a perfectly legal and proper holster, if that 30.07 sign is correctly posted at the entrance and you enter without consent, you're still violating the statute.
Correct. The holster doesn't negate the violation if the notice is proper and consent is lacking.
Wow, okay. Finally, let's discuss the extensive list of common defenses that apply specifically to these licensed handgun trespass sections, 30.06 and 30.07. These seem almost tailor-made to protect the rights of residents and tenants, especially those living in shared communities like apartment buildings or condos.
Absolutely. The legislature clearly recognized that while a business owner might choose to prohibit carry, a landlord or a homeowners association, HOA, shouldn't necessarily be able to restrict a resident's fundamental ability to possess and carry a firearm legally within their own home or when simply moving between their home and their vehicle.
So what kind of situations do these defenses cover?
They provide comprehensive defenses for license holders who are owners, tenants, or guests staying within various types of residential properties. This includes condominium apartments or units, leased premises or rental units like apartments, manufactured home lots in a park, and even hotel guests staying in a room.
And what exactly does the defense allow them to do in these places, even if a generic 30.06 or 30.07 sign might be posted somewhere on the overall property?
In all these residential situations, a license holder generally has a defense to a 30.06 or 30.07 charge if they are 1. Carrying or storing the handgun in their own unit or room. 2. Carrying the firearm directly en route between their unit room and their vehicle parked on the property. Or 3. Carrying or storing the handgun in their vehicle located in a parking area provided for residents or guests.
So basically, you can have it in your apartment, you can take it directly to and from your car, and you can keep it in your car on the property, regardless of signs posted at the clubhouse, for instance.
That's the general thrust of these defenses, yes. The ability to use the common areas for the limited purpose of transit between your personal sanctuary, your home or room, and your vehicle is legally protected for license holders.
That's a really important clarification for renters and condo owners. And is there one final simple defense against being charged under any of these specialized trespass sections, 30.05 firearms, 30.06, or 30.07?
Yes, there's the immediate departure defense. It's quite powerful. If a license holder is personally given oral notice to depart the property, whether it's because of a sign they missed or just the owner's preference and they promptly and peacefully depart as requested, that act of immediate compliance serves as a complete defense to prosecution under these sections.
So if you're told to leave because you're carrying and you just leave right away without arguing, you haven't committed the crime.
Exactly. Compliance immediately negates the offense in that specific scenario involving personal oral notice. #tagouttrap. Okay, so to try and synthesize all this highly technical information we've covered, the core legal insight you really need to walk away with involves those two key concepts, intent and intrusion.
Right.
Intent makes a huge difference. A person entering with criminal intent, the intent to commit a felony, theft, or assault, which is burglary, only needs to intrude any part of the body or a connected object to potentially commit a serious felony.
Minimal intrusion, big crime potential.
Exactly. But a person entering without that underlying criminal intent, which falls under criminal trespass, generally requires the intrusion of the entire body. Plus, they must have had prior notice entry was forbidden, or they must have received notice to depart and failed to do so, usually resulting in a misdemeanor.
Entire body intrusion, lower initial intent, often a lesser crime. Got it. Wow, what a detailed deep dive. These statutes really showcase how meticulously property rights and the exceptions to them are protected, right down to the finest detail, from the specific length and height of a purple paint line on a tree
to the required block lettering size and dual language requirements on a sign prohibiting handguns.
It's incredible. The law isn't just complex, it's highly, highly prescriptive in these areas, really trying to ensure that those criminal lines are as clearly defined as possible.
It does try. And, this raises an important, maybe provocative question for you, the listener, to mull over. Given this incredible level of detail we've seen regarding notice-specific signs, purple paint, mandatory fences for critical infrastructure, how does the related concept of effective consent actually function dynamically in today's world, particularly in modern, high-traffic commercial environments?
What do you mean exactly?
Well, for example, if a major retail store posts the technically perfect 30.06 sign prohibiting concealed carry, but they also have a uniformed security guard standing right by the door who watches licensed carriers walk in all day long and never says a word, does that guard's inaction potentially negate the effectiveness of the sign's notice? Could it imply consent despite the sign? How does that play out legally?
That's a really interesting wrinkle. Implied consent versus explicit notice.
Exactly. And furthermore, what happens when a property's legal classification potentially changes, even temporarily? Think about, say, a public school building. During the week, it's a specific type of property with certain rules, but what if it's rented out on a Saturday as a private wedding venue? Does its classification shift? How quickly does the property owner or renter need to adapt their signage or notice procedures to legally prevent accidental trespass, or maybe even to enhance a potential burglary charge if someone breaks in during that private event? That legal flexibility required within these rigid definitions That's where the real day-to-day complexity of property law truly lives.
Fantastic points to consider. That's a wrap on our deep dive into the precise legal architecture of burglary and criminal trespass law in Chapter 30. We really hope this gave you a clear, easily digestible understanding of these critical distinctions.
Hope it was helpful.
If you found this technical breakdown valuable, please remember to hit that subscribe button. It really helps support the channel. And we'll catch you on the next deep dive.